This video we're going to go over homework 2, and before we go into homework 2, there are a few concepts that we have to fully understand before we can work on it. So these concepts are on this page. So basically on this page of the class lecture slides, it consists basically everything you need to know in order to get homework 2 completed correctly. So let's now go into homework 2. Homework 2, answer the following questions for the method search. And here characteristics is basically we're partitioning the input space based on these characteristics. And based on these characteristics, we can have 3 blocks. And these blocks, if this partition is correct, these 3 blocks should cover every single possible input, and there's no overlap between these blocks. So this is the way you're supposed to describe a partitioning. I see a lot of people used other ways to describe partitioning where a lot of people didn't understand exactly the difference between characteristics and block. So basically you partition the input space based on characteristics, and these characteristics this characteristic give you 3 block or 2 block or whatever block that you define. So the first question, location of element in list fails the disjointness property. So what this means is basically there is one input within the input space belongs to more than one block based on the characteristic. So an example would be pretty simple. Here 3 and 3, 4, 3. So element is first entry in the list. Yes, element E is first entry in the list. And element is last entry in the list. And yes, it is also the last entry in the list. And then this test input fails the disjointness based on this characteristic. And next, location of element list failed the completeness property. So basically, this characteristic, it doesn't cover certain input. So the example would be this one. So element is first entry in the list. No, it's not. Element is last entry in the list. No, it's not. Element is some position other than first or last. No, it's still not. So basically, this test input was not covered by the characteristic. So it's supposed to belong to one and only one block, but right now it doesn't belong to any block. And this one that we just discussed before for problem A, it was supposed to belong to one and only one block, but it belongs to 2 block, which is block 1 and block 2. And C, supply one or more partitions that captures the intent of location of E in list. So some of you guys read the problem wrong because some of you guys just came up with a completely new non-related characteristic, but you're supposed to come up with one that is that captures the intent of location of E in the list. So in this case, the solution says basically where E is the first in the list, and if you look at the solution, this solution can be a little confusing because what this part is actually describing is actually the characteristics. So one characteristic would be whether E is first in the list. So this characteristic is either true or false. You cannot find any input that doesn't belong to one and only one of these blocks. So an element is either the first or not. So this characteristic works. And whether E is last in the list, this is another characteristic, and it's always true or false. And whether E is in the list is always true or false. So basically, these 3 are 3 characteristics, not 3 blocks, 3 characteristics. These true and false, these are the 2 blocks for each characteristics. So if you come up just 1 of this, it's fine. That's the correct answer. If you come up with 3 of this, then that's better. So that's it for the first question. And next we come to the second question. So second question can be a little bit confusing because you may not understand exactly what this problem is asking. So what this problem is asking is basically you have a class and you have 4 methods. How you can test these 4 methods. And if we go look at the definition of these 4 methods, first one, public generic stack. This is basically a constructor. Second method which is push method. It does take an input, which is x, which is an object that you're going to push into the stack, and it doesn't return anything. And the next method, which is object pop, it looks like it doesn't take any input, but actually this method is operated on a stack instance. So basically this object pop is going to be applied to an instance of generic stack. Whenever you call pop on one stack, it's going to pop up the element on the very top. And then boolean is empty. Is empty is also a method that you call on the instance, or you call on the class, which the input is the stack itself, and it returns whether the stack is empty or not, which returns true or false. So for the first method, or the constructor, it doesn't take any input, and for the second method, it takes input as with object x. For the third one, it takes a stack as the input. For the fourth one, it also takes a stack as input. So now let's go into the questions. So define characteristics of inputs. First, read through all of this. This is very useful for you to understand the question. So here we can have a characteristic of whether the stack is empty, which is it will be focusing on mainly testing this method. So we have this characteristic, and we have this block and this block, true block and false block, and the value of a example input that belongs to this block. And which is when it's empty, you give it an empty. When it's non-empty, you just give some random not-empty stack. And the size of stack, let's see. So size of stack, it doesn't necessarily capture like any specific intent, but the size of the stack can be a characteristic of the input. So 0, 1, and more than 1. So basically any input that you have is going to belong to one and only one of these blocks. And then whether the stack contains no entries. So basically this is just example characteristics that you can answer for this question. And next question, basically partition the characteristics into blocks. We just did here. True, false, 0, 1, more than 1, true, false, true, false, true, false. And next, define values for the blocks. And then these are the possible values. So a lot of people get points off from this homework due to unable to make the differentiation between certain definitions. Basically, what is partition, what is the block, what is the characteristics, and what is completeness, what is destroyedness. So before you even start reviewing for this homework, come back to this slide and make sure you understand everything here, and then you should be able to get everything in homework 2 done correctly, easily. And that's it for homework 2, and good luck.